Coogs House. All right, it's time to jump back on the gridiron, talk some about spring practices. Oh yeah, and the future pros worked out too.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater came to step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. We get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to YouTube fans. Good to see you again. Like I said before, we are approaching 900 subscribers relatively quickly, so make sure you subscribe. That way we get the latest on the Cougs each and every day, even as we're moving to the offseason for football and basketball teams simultaneously. So make sure you subscribe. We'll get you more content each and every day. Make sure we're going to be giving something away at 1,000 subscribers, so you want to make sure you're entered in that by hitting thumbs up, liking the videos, and leaving comments down below if, after listening to us talk some about football today, to avoid talking about basketball a little bit, and you're a little bored by that or don't know what to say, tell us if you think ice is a water-flavored popsicle. Now, in today's episode, we're going to do a little bit of talking, one, about what Alton McCaskill looked like some at practice recently, just reading between some stuff I got back and forth with a couple guys, and kind of what that means for Houston's offense as they shift things with Eman Naghavi as the running game coordinator, and things like that. Obviously, losing Shannon Dawson, Second segment, I want to talk some about what drills we're seeing at spring practice that lead us to think that. And the third segment, I want to talk some about about the pro days that also happened this spring, particularly one Houston Cougar who really, really showed out. But first, let's talk some about Alton McCaskill, because I think after the rising junior running back missed his entire sophomore season with a torn ACL from the spring the season before, it's fair to say that Houston's 2022 season might have been different had he been on the football field. Now, Houston did have what a lot of programs would consider a successful season at 8-5, right? I don't mean to say that there was somehow, or like, I don't know, like a big letdown, something like that for other programs. For where Houston was the season before, with McCaskill on the field in 2021, going 12-2 in the American Championship game, right? Birmingham Bowl, playing Auburn, all those things. I think it's fair to say that 2022 felt like a letdown, and in part, if you were trying to be like, well, this was predictable, one of the things that would have led to predicting that was the McCaskill injury, right? Obviously, you thought you had Tank back, Toon back, etc. But McCaskill missing the season, even as a sophomore, was going to be important because as a freshman, he was American Athletic Conference Rookie of the Year. He was All-Conference second team. He was the first Cougar to win both of those honors as a true freshman since Ed Oliver. Set the conference freshman rushing touchdown record, led all freshmen across the nation in rushing touchdowns, started 12 games, which again, obviously is very quick. Oh, it's time to put him in the game. And then he was just the guy. He also had 21 catches in the backfield, which, it's not his forte, but it was another option he had. I thought was interesting. I remembered him having a bunch of explosive rushes. I didn't realize he had 29 carries as a freshman for 10 or more yards. What I definitely recall is that he has a lot of yards after contact on his stat sheets as well. Really covered up a lot of holes as a freshman. And so I think it's worth questioning. They had a guy that rushed for almost 1,000 yards in 14 games as a freshman, missed his sophomore year. What's his junior year going to look like? And frankly, it raises some questions because I wonder what they're going to do with the freshman. He's really seems to be a very straight line running back in like a downhill kind of sense, and that he's not afraid of the A gaps. He's not a bunch of cuts and zigzags kind of guy. That's not how he got explosive runs by any stretch. When you're watching practices and what the notes I'm getting from practices look like, is that it's not that he's doing a bunch of zigzagging cuts and stuff like that, but they are kind of changing a little, or shifting, I should say, the emphasis on where the run. It's because instead of being like the A gaps and inside power types of teams, the singles and double pullers, they're doing a lot more of B gap fallout kind of stuff. and maybe some like single cutback kind of stuff. I want to talk more. I'm going to flip things on the fly here. I want to talk some more about that in the second segment. The reason I'm seeing that is because if you're watching lineman drills and things like that and looking at what they're looking at and what they're working on, they're doing two things. One, they're working all at like, it's more like 60-degree angles uphill, looking at like zone tracking paths and things like that in their individual work. They're also doing a lot of see it in zone line movements against air because they look like a wall moving, right? Because they're not splintered off yet. The goal of that would be to displace linemen and linebackers one direction, let the skinny guy behind them make their cuts, and make a single cut and get out downfield, right? I also was interesting in watching what Naghavi's doing intentionally with the offensive lineman. He's really focused on as they step across to kind of get that wall moving, right? It goes like right foot displaced, left foot upfield, and then you're just moving to the right or vice versa, obviously. He's got them working their inside hand in a way that like scoops up and that's like their inside hand closest to the football, hand away from the direction they're going all the time, is scooping down and kind of taking the like chest pad plate of the football pad. So if they got shoulder pads on, right, like scooping it up underneath. And that's kind of how they're like working to displace. Obviously, you start with double teams and work back and things like that. All that is to say that the offense is shifting a little bit. And I think in shifting the offense a little bit, we're going to see what McCaskill looks like in more open field kind of scenarios. I thought of him as a tough kid, so I want to see what that looks like. Not to say that he can't do that by any stretch. He's certainly got speed, obviously the explosive runs being that, right? But I do wonder, like, I felt like he got those yards because he ran through arm tackles. Does he get those yards if he gets out in more space, or does the hamper, like, does coming back from the ACL injury, it's not 1980s anymore, but what does that do to his more full speed kind of get up and go? I do think that in looking at this, though, Houston's running back room is far from empty. It's not like he's the only guy to be wondering about in this offense, because truthfully, like, if you're looking at like what Houston did in his absence, they kind of went by committee because Tajon Henry was also down with his own injuries throughout the season, kind of intermittently, and so you saw Brandon Campbell and Stacey Sneed kind of get some action back there as well, and they're a little bit more of the zone style back, especially Stacey Sneed, where they get like kind of aiming at the right tackle or aiming at the left tackle B gap area and then making a cut one way or the other and making something right. So is this more of a offense we're seeing happen to kind of diversify who the running back is and kind of open up more options and not put so much on McCaskill in his first year back? Or is this more of just Naghavi putting his imprint on the program and we're going to run what he runs, and players come and go? We've seen the transfer portal players come and go fairly frequently in college football these days. And so is it worth looking at like what Naghavi is most comfortable coaching? I want to get into more of that in a moment. And I know I said we wouldn't talk about basketball, but we do have to talk some about FanDuel, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and the tournament is heating up. There's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel. That's right, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. I'm telling you right now, and looking at the Final Four matchups for Saturday night, they've got Connecticut favored by 5.5 points over the Miami Hurricane. Now, part of me is saying this because Miami did knock out Houston, and I feel somewhat vindicated if Miami goes on to win it all. Part of me also says that this is the fourth or fifth game in a row now that Miami is the underdog by number of metrics and is, not the favorited team on betting sites like FanDuel. And they've continued to keep it closer than that point spread. So I'm taking them to keep it at least close to the 5.5, if not win the game outright. I do think the 149.5 over underline is interesting. I'd probably go over just because that's what I'd want to see. I'd like seeing basket sword. I'll let you pick what you want there. The other thing I want to say is on the other side of the bracket, Florida Atlantic feels like a underdog in every sense of everything, and Analytics have loved them all season, And I think that their toughest matchup thus far was Memphis in their first round game. You're very much looking at, and if I'm picking your picks here, Florida Atlantic versus Miami. They're all about 45 minutes away from one another, playing each other in NRG Stadium just down the road for the national championship game. But I'm telling you right now, the analytics people have loved Florida Atlantic since the start. I did pick Memphis over them in that opening round game, but I would have picked either one over Purdue. Either one game we got a chance to play Purdue. That was a funny story. But I think that's the way I would go with this. And I'm telling you to go with it at FanDuel.com because you get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. Remember to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right. So in all of that said, I want to pull up my my notes here because it did do some X's and O's and what kind of stuff that the Houston Cougars are working on. This is what I'm talking about when I'm looking at that like zone look kind of stuff where the linemen are all scooping in one direction. So right here I have a simple, trips to the right with trips to the tight end to the right kind of formation. That way you can still get some of your pass concepts out of it. I do have Matthew Golden isolated on the backside of this because I feel like in looking at next year's wide receiver core, based on who's been lining up out there at starting groups, I think I'd isolate Matthew Golden on the backside and kind of make other defenses, I should say, figure out what they want to do to him. And he gets to work out in a fun way in this action as well. The one caveat I want to put on my wide receivers out here is that I do have some questions as far as who plays what. I got Manjak playing the slot because they clearly want to go a little bit bigger in the slot this spring. And then I have Sam Brown on the outside. I can see Mikael Harrison-Pilot mixing up a lot of what they do as a freshman coming in and playing some serious snaps right away. You could even see them go a lot more four wide out maybe than I'm anticipating. Naghavi is an 11 and 12 personnel type of guy. I think that's why they're going with the tight end and a bigger body at the slot. However, we'll see where they go. You'll also notice about question marks at the quarterback spot. It does look like Lucas Cole is getting some decent reps there. Donovan Smith has the game time action reps, obviously from his time at Texas Tech. More on that as the spring goes on. Looking forward to see what that looks like in the spring game as well. That's the fun of spring football here in Houston. Anyway, the zone action here is the linemen are all scooping to the single side. What that means is they are assigned a zone, much like in basketball, if you were assigned a zone in the 2-3 zone, 3-2 zone, where you're heading in a direction and picking up the first guy that shows up. Now, typically, that's the first line of defense would be the lineman. So that's like your first threat. You might double team even there until something else shows up, if possible. And they'd be working to a linebacker set. That's why you have some of those guys with a little bit longer lines. They're working to cut off linebackers as well. You can even see two guys double team initially on defensive linemen, with one of them eventually peeling off as a linebacker shows up in their zone as their zone blocking to the right. What this does is it creates natural bubbles in the defense because their defense is stacked at different levels as the offensive line is moving. So as Alton is going across the quarterback's face, he's got some options on the front side where he can either take that B gap his body is aimed at. He can make a one-cut bounce around the tight end scoop block. I have, in this instance, Manjak blocking down as well in more of a crack kind of action. Now, your crack's more of a bended crack because it's not quite as legal as it used to be because it's a blindside block. However, that's the action I see here. And then the quarterback, whether it's Coley or Smith or whomever, can always pull it. And on the backside, I've got Golden motioning into a quick slant because if he's manned up on the backside and that linebacker does not sit to cover him and tries to flow into the box, you're technically almost certainly outnumbered in any kind of 3-4, 4-3, 3-3 stack defense. However, if he wants to cut down and come into the box, you're going to get that ball up before the offensive lineman 3 yards downfield, almost certainly, and certainly more than they're anywhere near downfield where you get called for it. And you can pop it to the backside to Golden. The other thing I think is interesting here is there's another way you could do it too, where you motion Manjak into the backfield because you're using a bigger slot. And this is the kind of stuff that Naghavi really, really, really liked at Tulane, where he'd put the extra guy and kind of get a second tight end out of it and run what's called more of a split zone, where he is kicking out Manjak, that is kicking out the backside end, making the read a true handoff or pass read. There's no option for the quarterback to run here. If they go to more of a Coley type system, I can see this being a lot more common as well. just because of his skill set versus Donovan Smith's. Donovan Smith's, you kind of want to get him out on the edge. Manjack is a big, strong receiver. He's not the only big, strong receiver on the roster, obviously. And so I think that what you're seeing is Houston's putting those big guys in the slots in a way in spring ball that would open up some of these kinds of actions, whether it is Josh Cobbs, right, the transfer in from Wyoming is another. He's like 6'4", 205. Manjack himself, what is he listed at here? They've got him at 6'3", 202. Like big, stronger bodies can come over, and it's more of a moving screen and basketball kind of block. But in either way, what you really have going here is this idea that you can really scoop through with the lineman and either read or kick out the backside guy as far as the line goes, and then put a pass read on said linebacker. Obviously, the run pass option at the top is a fairly complex setup a little bit. But in either direction, the running back has a number of different options where he makes one cut at about a foot behind or a yard behind the heels of the lineman before ultimately making the cut. It's a single cut play, but it's more of a 45-degree angle action than the downhill action we saw him run a lot more of a year ago. Now, a year ago, this is me putting in some of the same kind of stuff, same kind of personnel, but this is more what you saw Houston do a year ago, where they were pulling one or two linemen. In this instance, I got one guy pulling, that's the left guard, pulling through the lead block. The right side of the line is blocking down. I've got the tight end, in this case, I believe that's Matt Byrne, kicking out because he's gotten a lot of first-team reps thus far. The little bit I got going on here, but Matt Burns is doing the first-team kick-out kind of stuff. And then McCaskill will be falling behind him in more of a true vertical threat. Now, I know I do have a little bit of a bend in my line. That's because guys are placed kind of funny, and obviously I'm not a perfect artist here, but I do see this as a positive in getting him downfield really, really quickly. It's a lot less cutting, and frankly, it's a lot more of what I thought he was better at as a freshman. The other way I could see these systems kind of merge is if you also motion down Manjack again. The options obviously would be that you could have Manjack do the scooping himself, being on the side of that tight end, and get Burns down blocking a tight end spot and maybe hit slightly wider, but still in more of a downhill, no-cut speed and pace. I guess I should point both plays you'll notice have reading the backside to hit Matthew Golden on some sort of a slant or some sort of a drag across or whatever. Now, there'll be all kinds of reads on that people can do as they go when they're reading coverages and have different hand signals for one another. The other option, too, I guess, if you didn't think, I put both options here, it's if you didn't think Manjack could dig out that defensive end because it's like, I don't know, a future pro, right? Future pro defensive end, 270 or whatever. You might keep your tight end there, digging him out inside, and send Manjack and kind of just reverse their responsibilities and have him down block off the tackle's butt inside the hole. Either way, the guard would be leading through as a kick out or as a lead through block, like behind the kick out, and then you'd have McCaskill downhill. So three different ways you'd run this out of what they got going on with the personnel and stuff that they're trying to integrate into the offensive line. Now, all five of these options, I guess, do highlight McCaskill in different ways. I just am a firm believer, I think, in the pulling around and getting vertical with stuff as opposed to more of the 60-degree angle kind of plays in the zone concepts that we saw so much earlier in this. Because in both of these 45, 60-degree angle kind of stuff, there's options for cutting that happen behind the line of scrimmage. I'm a firm believer that when guys make more cuts behind the line of scrimmage, the defense has more time to react before you get to the line of scrimmage, right? If you got like the Reggie Bush kind of shakes, that's great, right? If you have my kind of shakes, it's not great. Now, obviously, McCaskill's a far better athlete than myself. I don't know if he's quite Reggie Bush anymore, but I do think that there's somewhere where this might be too much movement versus more of the true downhill threat that he is when he gets going. He's running fast through arm tackles. With all of that said, though, I am encouraged to hear that he is truly up and moving around. I know the ACL injury, like I mentioned at the top, is not the 1984 injury that could end football careers for running backs, but it is not something you want to hear about them going through either. So that was a obviously very positive note to hear. On a list of other positive notes, I want to get some to talk about the highlight of the pro day, because one particular athlete that is probably a little underscouted for the NFL got to show off a little bit. So let's jump on into it. Obviously, the pro day was last week. It was, Dana Holgorsen talked to the media a little bit before. He mentioned how it was nice having it later in the day, later in the offseason. You had guys like could actually come and watch. You had guys that are currently in the NFL coming to watch their guys. And he like pointed out like this is everyone's dream as a kid, is a tryout for the NFL. It's the best job interview you could possibly have. It's also potentially the most stressful, but it's like the best job interview you could ever have. Weirdly enough, for 3 Houston Cougars, this was their second time through said interview. Clayton Tune, Tank Dell, and Javarius Owens each went through the NFL Combine a few weeks back and performed fairly well. We covered that in an episode, I guess, however many weeks ago that's been now. Obviously, the thing that I think was most notable there was that Tank Dell went officially at a 4.49. I think you and I both thought he'd be down in more the 4.35, 4.38 kind of range. 4.49 is still pretty fast. It's just that a guy his size, I think we're hoping for a little bit faster. Javarius Owens also ran a 4.5. And so, I guess as a guy that we're hoping to be more versatile in the back half of a defense, I was hoping for more in the 4.4 range as well, but it's okay. That's okay. Game speed is always different too. The obviously Tank Dell and Clayton Tune have their chemistry, and it was good to see them run routes and throw balls together on the pro day. I think they both wowed some people. It sounds like people are really like appreciating the maturity of a kid like Tune. Tune he gets criticized some for being dry, and I guess that maybe, but I think that what teams are looking for in a guy that can come in and at least be a backup for the season right away and right the ship if you need to put him in or something like that is a guy that's mature enough to understand how that role functions and works. Tune is, I think, continuing to improve in draft stock because he's very clearly that guy. I think that was kind of the takeaway for a lot of people was like, oh, he's like the right size. He runs a pretty decent 40 time. He actually improved a little bit, it looks like. And he throws a good ball. And he's not going to complain. He's not going to be some sort of a problem guy in the locker room by any stretch. He's played a ton of snaps for a guy coming out of college, and he started so many games for University of Houston. Tank Dell, I think, was tremendous as well as far as like running and catching the football. Javarius Owens continued to put on a highlight in the workout kind of stuff. But the guy that everyone left the pro day talking about, because they're not even sure what position he's going to play at the next level, is Derek Parrish. Now, Derek Parrish missed most of last season injured. He's missed a lot of games in his career injured. And admittedly, he's a little bit undersized, right? Now, Derek Parrish might like, it's weird to call him undersized, I guess, when you look at him in like a t-shirt and a Speedo like they're running around in. He's listed at 6'2", 245. Not an ounce of anything extra on that 6'2", 245. Very impressive athlete running around running his 40. He clocked in at 4.56. For reference, that's less than it's just over 0.5 of a second slower than one Tank Dell, right? That's the kind of straight line speed we're talking about. That's why he was such an explosive pass rusher for the Cougars for so long. He had a 37-inch vertical leap. He had 27 reps on the bench press. And after doing those things and showing off some bend in the curve and rush and passer action, he also lined up as a tight end and caught balls from Clayton Tune. Excellent out of the backfield, excellent line of scrimmage out of a 3-point stance. All check marks. He even lined up and did some deep snapping, it sounds like. And it truly looks like that he's going to be drafted potentially in that like late 6th, 7th round time. Not because not because he won't end up being a potential pro for a long time. Frankly, deep snappers have long careers. But because people aren't quite sure what he will play. In Houston, he was an impact performer that impacted winning as a pass rusher. Houston had to play him as a pass rusher. And realistically, in a Division I college football game, it's hard to really like get a lot of guys to play both sides in the trenches. I know you see skill guys do it some, But to go from beating up on each other as a pass rusher and playing the run as a D lineman and so on, to then beating up on each other as a run blocker and like getting out in a pass concept as a tight end is a whole different ask from guys. And I think it's fascinating that he can do both, and he's proven he can do both. And it just doesn't seem like anyone knows which one to assign him to do at the next level. But it does sound like people are fairly certain that he'll be doing something at the next level. And I got to tell you, if you're looking for something, if nothing else, a deep snapper that is roughly 250 pounds, that puts it on the money and runs a 4.55, that's a pro. Right? Think about the way that guy's playing football. He's snapping and sprinting at elite speed downfield to chase the punt guy down. Yeah, that guy's a pro. I'm fairly confident, and I'm so confident that I tell you, find me at Painsworth512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, our social media handles, and we'll be talking about it. Let's talk about Cougs and the pros. Let's talk about pro days. Talk about NFL draft. I guess we'll talk about NBA draft at some point too. And then keep talking about spring ball. I am learning more and more about spring ball now that the basketball season is over. The Houston Cougars, I'm like diving back in and getting notes out and talking to people about what's going on there. So make sure you hit me up at Painsworth512, PAINSWRTH512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all your social media handles. Be happy to talk all things Cougs. The Rockets are kind of wrapping up we'll call it a rocky rebuilding season. The Astros are about to take the first pitch, too. I am working on getting some spring sports coverage in. That's a work in progress. But make sure you hit subscribe down below. We'll do all those kinds of things all spring, summer, and off season long, building up to our first year in the Big 12. If you're looking for a second listen of the day, let me recommend Locked On College Basketball. It's a daily college basketball podcast here at Locked On. Andy and Isaac do a great job covering all of the madness that is March, including things like the transfer portal, which we may get into some later this week. So make sure you go hit that up as well. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go Cougs.